Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. In earlier episodes, we talked about how Krishna had married 16,108 wives. And mind-blowing as that was, it was even more amazing how that happened. You see, it started with Narakasura, a very powerful demoniac person who had been creating havoc all over the world. He had kidnapped all these princesses and put them in a cave. Ultimately, Krishna had destroyed this asura, this demoniac being, and released all the princesses that he had kidnapped. And when they were released, they all begged of Krishna that we love you, we have been hearing about you, we've always wanted to be with you, please marry us, because no one else will. We've been kidnapped by this person, and he has held us captive for so long. Please marry us. We have always adored you, always admired you, and we want to be your wives. And that was 16,100 women. And Krishna agreed to marry all of them. Not only that, he gave each of them a palace of her own in his capital city of Dwarka. Not only that, but each of them had hundreds of servants to take care of them. And each of them had many, many babies with Krishna. So how was it possible? And this was the key question that was plaguing so many people was, how could somebody do that? I'm sure you're wondering. And so was Narada Muni, the great sage. You see, Narada Muni is known literally as like a transcendental spaceman. He can travel all across the universe pretty much instantly at will. And this great sage, this great yogi, this great mystic wanted to find out for himself. He'd heard about what had happened. He'd heard about Krishna marrying all these women. And he wanted to see for himself how amazing it is that a single person, Sri Krishna, simultaneously has married them, given them separate palaces. How does he take care of them? How is this even possible? So the sage of the demigods, of the devas, eagerly went to the city of Dwarka, the island capital of Krishna. Now this capital of Krishna, Dwarka, is incredible in itself. Narada arrived there. And it was a place that had been built by Vishwakarma. He was known as the architect of the devas, of the demigods. Until today, he is worshipped by all kinds of builders and sculptors and people who are in the trade of building things. But he was known to do amazing things, miraculous things. He had overnight built this entire city, beautiful, in a city on an island. It had palaces everywhere, 900,000 palaces. Until today, the remains can be found about a half a mile away from Gujarat in the ocean. They found but the submerged remains of the city of Dwarka. This is what you're looking at here are the underwater photographs of Krishna's capital from 7,000 years ago, still existing till today. So Dwarka, of course, exists as today as well, and there are beautiful temples out there, all dedicated to the worship of Krishna. It's on the ocean. And so Narad Muni went there. Now, this place is described very beautifully in the Bhagavatam. It says in Dwarka, he saw that the gardens and parks were full of various flowers of different colors and orchards that were overloaded with a variety of fruits. Beautiful birds were chirping and peacocks were delightfully crowing. There were tanks and ponds full of blue and red lotus flowers, and some of these sites were filled with varieties of lilies. Lakes were full of nice swans and cranes whose voices resounded everywhere. Dwarka boasted 900,000 royal palaces, all constructed with crystal and silver and splendorously decorated with huge emeralds. Inside these palaces, the furnishings were bedecked with gold and jewels. The highways, lanes, streets, crossings, and marketplaces were all beautifully decorated. The entire city was full of residential homes, assembly houses, and temples, all of different architectural beauty. All of this made Dwarka a glowing city. The big avenues, the crossings, the lanes and streets, and also the thresholds of every residential house were very clean. On both sides of every path there were bushes, and at regular intervals there were large trees that shaded the avenues so that the sunshine would not bother the passers-by. A lot of people think that at that time, 7,000 years ago, there wasn't much of humanity around. We've been told by archaeologists that we were pretty much cave dwellers, or we were just, coming out of that. We were coming out of that phase, I think, and we were just beginning agriculture, and we weren't a very sophisticated society. But according to the Bhagavatam, that is not true. In the time of Krishna, 5,000 years ago at least, or in some estimates now that are coming out, 5,000 BC, so 7,000 years ago, there were such incredible cities. And there were such advanced civilizations, the likes of which we have not even imagined. People who lived in harmony with nature, people who worshipped God in the most beautiful of ways, who not only honored technology, but also honored nature and honored God and honored each other, as you'll see in today's episode. Now, within the city of Dwarka was a beautiful private residential area. And here, the demigod, the Vishwakarma, had shown all his divine skill in creating the residential area of Krishna. And thus it was gorgeously decorated by the 16,000 palaces of Krishna's queens. Narad Muni, the sage amongst the demigods, entered one of these immense palaces. Supporting the palace were coral pillars, decoratively inlaid with Vidura gems. Sapphires bedecked the walls, and the floors glowed with perpetual brilliance. In that palace were canopies with hanging strands of pearls. There were also seats and beds fashioned of ivory and precious jewels. In attendance were many well-dressed maidservants bearing lockets on their necks, and also armor-clad guards with turbans, fine uniforms, and jeweled earrings. The glow of numerous jewel-studded lamps dispelled all darkness in the palace. On the ornate ridges of the roofs danced loudly crying peacocks who saw the fragrant aguru incense escaping from the holes of the latticed windows and mistook it for a cloud. Srila Prabhupada writes, there was so much incense and fragrant gum burning that the scented fumes were coming out of the windows, and the peacocks sitting on the steps became illusioned by the fumes, mistaking them for clouds, and they began dancing jubilantly. When the rains come, there are clouds, and when there are clouds, the peacocks come alive. They open up their feathers and they make a great display, and they begin to dance, and that's what they were doing. There were many maidservants, all of whom were decorated with gold necklaces, bangles, and beautiful saris. There were also many male servants who were nicely decorated in cloaks and turbans and jeweled earrings. Beautiful as they were, the servants were all engaged in different household duties. So this is the description of one of those palaces. And you might say, well, how is this possible? How can Krishna have 16,108 such palaces for each of his, one for each of his queens? And then how does he get to be with each of them? And how does he satisfy them? And how does he love them? And what kind of relationship is this? And how is this all possible? The first thing you've got to start with is to know who is Krishna. And if that's clear in your mind, then everything will follow. If you start with the idea that he's an ordinary human being, well, then of course this is all ridiculous and is utter nonsense. You'd be right. But if this is the supreme being, the supreme Godhead, the source of all creation, then everything is possible for him. Then all of us have relationship with him. And these fortunate, blessed souls had chosen to be his wives in the time when he was here, incarnate on this earth, 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. So in that palace where Narad Muni had gone, the learned Brahmin Narad Muni saw Sri Krishna, together with his wife Rukmini, who was fanning him with a gold-handled, yak-tailed fan. She personally served him in this way. So this is a yak-tail fan. And even though she was constantly attended by 1,000 maidservants equal to her in personal character, beauty, youth, and fine dress, she continued to worship Krishna on her own. So Narada is watching this entire scene. The Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is the greatest upholder of dharma. Dharma means the right way of righteousness, the way we need to live according to the codes presented by God. Those are the laws of nature. Those are the laws by which humans should live. Those are the laws that allow us to prosper and grow, not just materially, but also spiritually. Those laws of dharma honor each other, honor nature, and honor God. So Narad Muni was noticing that Sri Krishna, the greatest upholder of dharma, was here in this situation, being cared for by these wonderful ladies. When Krishna saw Narad, he rose at once from goddess Lakshmi's bed. You see, Krishna was being taken care of by his wife. And when Narad approached, he got up and greeted him. He rose from Lakshmi's bed and bowed his crowned head at Narad's feet. He's bowing down. The Supreme Godhead, God himself, is bowing down to this great sage. Why? Because that is the way of dealing with saintly people, of dealing with Brahmins, of dealing with evolved beings, highly evolved beings like Narad. So Krishna is receiving him firstly by joining his palms, then by bowing down his head at Narad's feet, and then having the sage sit down in his own seat. Krishna's putting him on his seat. This is the Vedic culture. You see, this same Narad Muni worships Krishna as his Ishtadev, as the Supreme Godhead, as the source of all creation. And here we see that Krishna is not only bowing down to him, but is bathing Narad's feet. And then he takes the water from the dirty water from his washed feet and puts it on his head. This is absolutely amazing. Although Sri Krishna is the supreme spiritual authority, the one in charge, the one who is the source, the one who is the creator of the universe and the master of his devotees, it was proper for him to behave in this way. For his name is Brahmanya Deva, the Lord who favors the Brahmins. Thus Sri Krishna honored the sage Narad by bathing his feet, even though the water that bathes his own feet, Krishna's own feet, becomes the Ganges, the ultimate holy shrine. You see, Krishna's feet are considered the most pure, the most holy. The entire Ganga river is purified by having touched his feet. And so that is why it is said that those who bathe in the Ganges, like they do at the Mahakumbh right now, those who bathe in the Ganges river, the Ganga, become free from all their sinful actions, all their karma. Why? Because it has touched his feet. That very Krishna exhibits such humility, such proper code of conduct, such absolute reverence for the sages that he bows down to them, that he washes their feet and places that water upon his head, thereby showing us the way in which we need to live, how we need to practice humility, how we need to understand our own insignificance and understand that therein, by being small, by being humble, by being kind, by being compassionate, we gain the favor, the grace, the mercy of God. Srila Prabhupada explains, Krishna in Dwarka enjoyed the pastimes of a perfect human being. When therefore he washed the feet of the sage Narada and took the water on his head, Narada did not object, knowing well that Krishna did so to teach everyone how to respect saintly persons. After fully worshipping the great sage of the demigods, according to Vedic injunctions, Sri Krishna, who is himself the original sage, Narayan, the friend of Narayan, conversed with Narad, and his speech was as sweet as nectar. You might think, oh, he's God. He should be proud. He should speak with a very powerful voice. He should be very commanding. He is going to decide who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, and that's all he does. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what we say here. Sri Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, the source of all creation, is speaking in a way where his words are as sweet as nectar. Finally, he asked Narad, what may we do for you, our Lord and Master? He refers to Narad as his Lord and Master. Narad said, O Almighty Lord, it is no surprise that you, the ruler of all worlds, show friendship for all people and yet subdue the envious. As we all know, you descend by your sweet will in order to bestow the highest good in this universe by maintaining and protecting it. See, God is not an absent God. That's what we think. God is not here. God, I don't believe in God. If I don't see God, then God doesn't exist. Yeah, right. That's how people talk, right? But the fact is, you don't even see the president of the country. You don't see your own mind, yet it exists. You don't see your brain, yet it exists. How many of you have seen a brain? Right? How many of you have seen your own mind? Hardly anyone. Yet it exists. Whether you see it or not, it exists. How many of you have seen the planets and galaxies that go back millions of light years away? We haven't. Nobody has. Yet they exist, and there are possibly people there. We do not know of times gone by, and we do not know of times in the future, yet we in our arrogance believe we know everything. That is our pride. That is our downfall. So Narada is telling him, you descend by your sweet will in order to bestow the highest good on this universe by maintaining and protecting it. Thus your glories are widely sung. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti says, in the mantra Om, you've heard the mantra Om, right? Well, it consists of 3 syllables, A, U, and Ma. And Krishna says very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. Everywhere in the Vedas, when the mantra is recited, it begins with Om. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalak. So Om is there in the beginning. Now, he says here that the letter A, so there's 3 sounds, A, U, and Ma. That's how you chant it. You don't just say Om, Om, Om. That's not the correct way. Because there's no sound like O in Sanskrit. Aum. So 3 sounds. The first sound, A, signifies Vishnu. The letter U signifies Lakshmi. And the letter M refers to their servant, which is the 25th element. The 25th element is the jiva, the living entity, every one of us. Every living being is a servant of the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, and he is the true friend of every living being. Thus, even when he chastises envious persons like Jarasandha, there was this king called Jarasandha who had attacked him 17 times and been defeated by Krishna 17 times. Finally, Krishna had just left him, gone away to Dwarka, letting this person live. So when he chastises persons like Jarasandha, such punishment amounts to real friendship, since both his chastisement and his blessings are for the benefit of the living being. We see this again and again when Krishna even killed the asuras, the demonic beings who came to attack him and kill him. He blessed them by giving them moksha, liberation, which great yogis attain after tremendous austerity and penance and so many lifetimes of practice. Krishna instantly gave them. Why? Because they hated him with such a passion. Now, whether you hate him or you love him, do it intensely. And that intensity is what becomes your meditation. You see, hate and love are both very intense meditations. So whatever you hate, that will then bless you with its energy, right? You hate someone who's really negative, someone who's really messed up. Well, that person's energy will now download itself into you. Well, in this case, if you hate the Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is the source of all goodness and all beauty and all love, well, that energy will come into you. So whether you love him or you hate him, do it intensely. In this case, we've heard of many of his devotees who loved him intensely, but we've also come across those who hated him, and even they received liberation. So Narada says, now I have seen your feet, which grant liberation to your devotees, which even Brahma and other great personalities of unfathomable intelligence can only meditate upon within their hearts, and which those who have fallen into the well of material existence resort to for deliverance. See, those of us that want to be delivered, want to get out of the cycle of birth and death, want to become free from suffering, take shelter of his feet, as the great sage Narada is doing, and as he claims those who are sincere seekers all will do. Narada says, please favor me so that I may constantly think of you as I travel about. Please grant me the power to remember you. See his humility. Narada is already at that place, but he is giving us the example that how we need to pray, not for worldly things, not for how can I get power or how can I get fame or how can I build wealth, but how may I have the power to remember you, Krishna. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhava mad bhakto mad yaji mam namaskuru. Always think of me. Always think of me. Bow down to me. Offer your love to me. Offer your heart to me. I will take care of you. Do not fear. So this thinking is very important. This thinking of him, right? This thinking becomes your meditation. Now, if your thinking is always about your worries and about your stresses and about your tensions and about the world, well, then that's what you're thinking about. And Krishna says in the Gita that wherever your mind is fixed upon at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will go, to that place or to that level of consciousness you will go. So if your mind has been immersed in solving the problems of this world, in continually having to deal with your worries and anxieties and fears and try to put out the fires of material existence, well, then you get to stay here. You're not going to remember him at the time of death. You will remember him at the time of death if you practice doing that here and now and every single day. How will you remember him? Through chanting his name, through hearing such pastimes, through deliberating upon his wonderful activities. And as you meditate upon these, upon his form, on all the ways, there are so many different ways in which you can connect with him. There are 9 processes of bhakti. I'm not going to go into all that today, but there are all different ways by shravanam, kirtanam, hearing about him, speaking about him, smaranam, remembering him, Vishnu, archanam, worshipping him, dasyam, becoming his servant, and surrendering yourself fully unto him. So these are all different ways in which you can become completely devoted to God. And it is that devotion that makes you advance rapidly in spirituality, or for that matter, in anything. If anything, you want to achieve anything in life, you've got to be devoted to it. If that's a sport, if that's your business, if that's your relationship, if that's your kids, you need to be devoted. And if you want God, then you have to be devoted to God. It's a very simple thing. That's how you get to that ultimate destination. So now he said all this, and Narad then walks away. And he goes into another palace. He enters the palace of another of Krishna's wives. And he was eager to witness the spiritual potency possessed by the master of all masters of mystic power. So now, there in the next palace that he went to, he saw Krishna playing at dice, a game of dice with his beloved consort and with his friend Uddhava. Krishna again got up, again worshipped Narad as if he was seeing him for the first time. And by standing up and offering him a seat and so on, and then as if he did not know. And he asked him again, when did you arrive? What can needy persons like us do for those who are complete in themselves? Referring to Narad. Krishna is complete in himself, and yet he refers to himself as a needy person. Please understand the level of humility. When a truly needy person calls themselves needy, it's not a big deal. When a person who is hungry calls himself hungry, that's a factual statement. But when someone is complete in himself, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate, he is complete in every way. He needs nothing. And yet he refers to himself with such humility. What can needy persons like us do for those who are complete in themselves? In any case, my dear Brahmin, please make my life auspicious. Oh, it is so amazing to learn the ways of humility here. So amazing to learn from Krishna's example how we need to practice humility. We are always trying to put on a good act. We're always trying to look good. We're always trying to act as if we are more than we are. We want to have people be impressed by us, whether it's through our wealth, whether it's through our looks, whether it's through our position in life, in our job or whatever else it might be. We want people to admire us. We want people to like us. We want people to love us. But Krishna is doing the opposite. One who has everything, one who is everything, is here bowing down with the utmost humility to the great sage Narad. He is teaching us by example how we need to live, because it is in humility that we will gain everything. When the cup is empty, now you can fill it. But if the cup is full, you can't give it anything. So people say, well, I don't hear God. I don't understand God. Empty your cup. Come to a place of humility like Arjun does when he says to Krishna, I am confused about my duty. I do not know what to do. I am bewildered. Help me. And when we are in that mood of humility, then he reaches out to us. Because then our cup is empty. Then our canvas is blank. Then he can write and address us with fresh ideas and fresh thoughts. As long as you think you know and your cup is full with your knowing and all that you're so smart and you're so powerful and you're so amazing and you're so fabulous, well, as long as that's the case, he lets you go. He lets you be. Go right ahead. No problem. You're not going to heaven or hell or anything. Just go deal with all that and let your ego rule your life and then see where it leads you. But the day you realize that this ego has been deluding you all along is when you're ready to listen to him. When you realize that all the attractions of the world and all the desires of the world have only led you into an infinite dance, chasing this and that and that and that and that and getting nowhere, then you're ready. At that point, you have humility. So Krishna is showing us what humility sounds like. Thus addressed, Narad was astonished Why was he astonished? Because in the previous palace, Krishna had been talking to him in a whole different way. He had been doing all kinds of different things. How was Krishna there and here as well? So then Narad stood up silently and went to another palace. Prabhupada writes, in all the palaces Narad visited, Krishna worshipped and honored him. In all the palaces, we went one after another. So in the next palace, Narad saw that Krishna was engaged as an affectionate father, petting his small children. And there, from there, he entered another palace and saw Krishna was preparing to take his bath. And in one palace, Krishna was performing a fire sacrifice, and in another, worshipping the 5 Mahayagyas. I'll tell you about that in a minute. In another, he was feeding Brahmins, and in yet another, he was eating the remnants of food left by the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the priests. So, you see, Krishna was engaged in different activities in each of the palaces. Here it's talking about the 5 Mahayagyas, or great sacrifices, which are reciting the Vedas, offering oblations, that is, offering of ghee and various things into the sacrificial fire, waiting on guests, making offerings to the forefathers, and offering a share of one's food to all living entities in general. Srila Prabhupada comments, the Pancha Yagya sacrifice is compulsory for a householder. Knowingly or unknowingly, everyone, specifically the householder, is committing 5 kinds of sinful activities. When we receive water from a water pitcher, we kill many germs that are in it. Similarly, when we use a grinding machine or take foodstuffs, like cooking them, we kill many germs. When sweeping the floor or igniting a fire, we kill many germs. And when we walk on the street, we kill many ants and other insects. Consciously or unconsciously, in all our different activities, we are killing. Therefore, it is incumbent upon every householder to perform the Pancha Suna sacrifice to get rid himself of the reactions of such sinful activities. So, we're constantly, even if you're vegetarian, you're involved in some form of killing of plants. You want to minimize that, of course. As a devotee of Krishna, as a person who loves God, you want to minimize the amount of damage or harm that you're doing to other living entities. And if you have to consume something, it needs to be with the minimum amount of harm. So that's what we do. And the other way to purify yourself of such sinful activities is to take your food and offer it to God before you eat it. After you cook it and before you eat it, you first prepare it as an offering to God. Krishna says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati, that my devotees first offer to me whatever they eat. Whether you offer me a leaf, a fruit, a flower, I will accept it. Right? So that food which is offered to him then becomes prasad, and that purifies us. But otherwise, food causes reaction, sinful reaction, even if you are just a vegetarian. But what kind of food does Krishna accept? He doesn't accept just meat or anything like that. No. Only the food that causes the least harm, and that is vegetables and fruits and so on. And those are also the foods that are best for us, for our health, physically and mentally. Now, I know there's many theories around, especially in the Western world, especially with science. They've come with all different concepts. But the rishis, the sages, the wisest of people that lived on this planet, who knew how to be able to conquer the mind and the senses, and who knew how to live a life of peacefulness, who knew how to devote oneself to God, who knew the art and science of liberation, they teach us that if you want to progress spiritually, you cannot be eating animals and such foods. You need to focus yourself on eating only those foods that are sattvic, or in the mode of goodness, which are vegetables, fruits, and so on and so forth, milk, etc. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that all the different times of day referred to here were occurring simultaneously in Krishna's palaces. So not only was there different activities taking place in different palaces, but these activities were taking place at different times of day, although Narad was going there from one to the other. So there was this other miraculous thing going on. Narad saw a fire sacrifice, which is a morning ritual. At the same time, In the next palace, he saw Krishna feeding Brahmins and accepting their remnants, which is a noontime activity. Somewhere, Krishna was observing the rituals for worship at sunset by refraining from speech and quietly chanting the Gayatri mantra. And elsewhere, he was moving about with sword and shield in the area set aside for sword practice. In one place, Krishna was riding on horses, elephants, and chariots, and in another place, he was resting on his bed while bards recited his glories. Sometimes he was consulting with royal ministers like Uddhava, and somewhere else he was enjoying in the water surrounded by many society girls and many other young women. Somewhere he was giving well-deserved decorated cows to exalted Brahmins, and elsewhere he was listening to the auspicious narration of epic histories and Puranas. Somewhere Krishna was found enjoying the company of a particular wife by exchanging joking words with her. Notice, God enjoys joking. Had you ever considered that? Yes, very much so. Krishna very much enjoys not only doing mischievous things as he did in his childhood, but also enjoying humor. And you'll see this again and again now. Somewhere else he was found engaged along with his wife in religious ritualistic functions. Somewhere Krishna was found engaged in the matters of economic development, and somewhere else he was found enjoying family life. Now remember, this was all happening simultaneously. Somewhere he was sitting alone meditating, and somewhere he was rendering menial service to the elders. Right? When Krishna was meditating. And then at other times he was rendering menial service to his elders, offering them desirable things and reverential worship. Srila Prabhupada writes, meditation as recommended in authorized scripture is meant for concentrating one's mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Krishna is himself the original Vishnu. But because he played the part of a human being, he taught us by his personal behavior what is meant by meditation. This activity of meditation indicates the Brahma Muhurt hour. So that is the early hours before sunrise. That's about an hour, and Brahma Muhurt is considered the best time for meditation, and that's about an hour and a half before the sun rises. So if the sun rises at 6 o'clock, then that's 4:30. If it rises at 7:30, then it's 6 o'clock. Right? An hour and a half before sunrise is considered the Brahma Muhurt hour, and that is the most auspicious time for meditation. Why? Because after the sun rises, we get into the mode of doing. And in the mode of doing, it's very difficult to focus your mind and meditate. The whole point of meditating is to quiet the mind. And that is best done in the Brahma Muhurt hour. In one place, Krishna was planning battles in consultation with some of his advisors, and in another place, he was making peace. Somewhere Krishna and his brother Balaram were together pondering the welfare of the pious. Narada saw Krishna engaged in getting his sons and daughters married to suitable brides and bridegrooms at the appropriate time, and the marriage ceremonies were being performed with great pomp. Narada also observed how Sri Krishna, the master of all yogic masters, arranged to send away his daughters and sons-in-law and also receive them at home again at the time of great holiday celebrations. All the citizens were astonished to see these celebrations. Somewhere he was worshipping the demigods, the devas, with elaborate sacrifices, and elsewhere he was fulfilling his religious obligations by doing public welfare work, such as the construction of wells, public parks, and monasteries. So imagine a ruler who could expand himself unlimitedly. What all would he do? And especially if he was a kind, compassionate, loving ruler who wanted to protect his citizens. And you see from here the activities, how he's looking after each and every person, from the Brahmins and priests to the elderly, to the children, to everyone, including taking care of the city, making sure everything is well managed. He can expand himself. Most rulers can't do that. We're human beings. And most human beings are selfish, and they're out to get something for themselves. They're there trying to exploit the population, the people who've elected them, or the people who voted for them, or the people who put them into authority, or from whom they took authority if they did it by force. But Krishna, being the Supreme Godhead, is showing us that he cares about each and every single person and wants the best for us. In another palace, he was on a hunting expedition, mounted on his horse and accompanied by the most heroic of the Yadu dynasty, his family. Somewhere Krishna, the Lord of mystic power, was moving about in disguise among the homes of ministers and other citizens in order to understand what each of them was thinking. So he disguised himself like Ram did, and he was going around listening to understand what people are thinking and what's on their minds. Now, does he need to do that, or can he just sit back and hear everybody? Of course he can. But he's showing us what an ideal king should do and how an ideal king should behave. Having thus seen this display of the Supreme Godhead's Yoga Maya, this is called Yoga Maya, we are under the influence of Mahamaya. Maha means great and Maya means illusion, the great illusion. We are under the influence of the great illusion, Mahamaya. And under this illusion, we think that we are this body. We think that our mind is actually ourselves and whatever it tells us is true. We think that our emotions, whatever our intelligence tells us, whatever our ego tells us, is all for our welfare. But I have to tell you, it is not. It is absolutely not. Neither our mind, nor our intelligence, nor our ego are acting in our welfare. They do not even know what our welfare is. They do not even know who we are. So how can they act in our welfare? Only when you have understood the spiritual science will you know who you are. Will you know how to connect with who you are at the deepest level, at the soul level. And it is only from there you will know what is in your best interest. So this Mahamaya is what we are under. And what Krishna was exhibiting there is known as Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya is that energy of Krishna. It's a spiritual energy which facilitates all his pastimes. So, having seen this display of the Supreme Godhead's Yoga Maya, Narada mildly laughed and then addressed Krishna, who was adopting the behavior of a human being. Narada said, "Now we understand your mystic potencies, which are difficult to comprehend even for great mystics." Right? So keep in mind, if you're struggling with understanding Krishna and his activities, well, it's no surprise. He's saying even great mystics cannot understand Krishna and his activities. Even highly learned spiritualists, highly advanced spiritualists fail to understand him. So therefore, it is not surprise that we cannot understand his ways. Why he does certain things. We may give you some reason, we may have some explanation, but we might be wrong. We don't know. We depend on our gurus, we depend on our teachers to guide us and help us, because we really, truly do not know. It is only Krishna who reveals himself, and to whatever degree he does is what we can understand. So here Narada is seeing, and Krishna is revealing to him very, very deliberately what he is, and in all these wonderful ways, which even the people who were there did not understand. Narada says, "O Supreme Soul, O Master of all mystic power, only by serving your feet have I been able to perceive your powers." In the purport it's written, this verse indicates that even great mystics like Brahma and Shiva cannot fully comprehend the mystic power of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. Narada then says, "Please give me your leave. Allow me to leave. I will wander about the worlds, the universe, which are flooded with your fame, loudly singing about your pastimes, which purify the universe." You see, by hearing about Krishna, by speaking about him, we become purified. By understanding his, or even to the little degree that we can understand his pastime, just even if we don't understand, if we just hear, and if we just speak about his wonderful glories, we become purified. If we chant his name, we become purified. It is so powerful. The Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, said, "O Brahmin, I am the speaker of Dharma. its performer and sanctioner. I observe religious principles or dharmic principles to teach them to the world. My child, do not be disturbed. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains Krishna's feelings as follows. He says, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states, whatever a great person does, ordinary people follow. So Krishna is trying to relate to Narada, and he says, that is why I bathed your feet today in order to help propagate the principles of Dharma. Do not think that you have committed an offense by allowing me to bathe your feet today. And I accept the water as holy remnants. Just as the son does not offend his father by touching him with his foot while sitting on his father's lap, so you should understand that in the same way, my son, you have not offended me. So what he's pointing out is that all of these actions were done to show us how we need to behave with highly evolved beings and how we need to treat them and how we need to honor them. Those who are Brahmins, those who are saintly people, those who are devotees. In every palace, Narada had seen the Krishna in his same personal form, executing the transcendental principles of Dharma that purify those engaged in household affairs. Krishna's activities in the many palaces were performed by his spiritual form, which manifested in many places at once. You see, a material form like this cannot be in many places at once. A material form like this can only be in one place. But because Krishna comes to this world in his original spiritual form, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, therefore that spiritual form can very easily expand. This is not possible for any human being. This is not even possible for any yogi. This is not even possible for any great mystic. Only Krishna can do this. That is why Narada had come to see for himself. This vision was revealed to Narada because of his desire to see it and Krishna's desire to show it to him. It has to be both ways. One may desire something, you may desire, I may desire to see this particular Leela or pastime of Krishna, but we may not be able to. It is also on him. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that the other residents of Dwarka could see Krishna only in the particular part of the city they themselves occupied and not anywhere else. Even if they would sometimes go to another part of the city, they could not see this, that Krishna was in the other palace as well. They could not see that he was doing different things. No, the residents of Dwarka could not see that. Krishna gave a special view of his pastimes to his beloved devotee, Narada. Having repeatedly seen the vast mystic display of Krishna, whose power is unlimited, the sage was amazed and filled with wonder. Krishna greatly honored Narada, faithfully presenting him with gifts related to economic prosperity, sense gratification, and religious duties. Of course, Narada has no need for such things because he is just a wandering mendicant who is traveling all over the universe. He doesn't need economic prosperity and sense gratification and so on and so forth. But Krishna still honored him in so many ways. Thus, fully satisfied, the sage departed, constantly remembering Sri Krishna. What would have happened if you were there? If you had seen all this? How would it have impacted you? Would you be remembering Krishna? What would be your state of mind? Would you realize, oh gosh, I've been so enamored with this world, but there is another reality altogether, another dimension altogether that I have had no clue about, and my goodness, look at that, what I've just seen today. In this way, Krishna imitated the ways of ordinary humans, manifesting his divine potencies for the benefit of all beings. And thus he enjoyed in the company of his 16,108 exalted queens who served him with their shy, affectionate glances and laughter. Krishna is the ultimate cause of universal creation, maintenance, and destruction. Anyone who chants about, hears about, or simply appreciates the extraordinary activities he performed in this world which are impossible to imitate, will surely develop loving devotion for the Supreme Lord, the bestower of liberation. So with that, I think we'll wind up for today. If any of you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. If any of you have any doubts, if any of you have any, many of you are here and there on Instagram, I'd love to have you chime in. Write down your questions. I can read them here. If you feel hesitant, that's okay. But even the simplest question is worthy of asking. You never know. It might be something very revealing. It might land up opening your eyes to a new possibility, a new reality. Now, and for those of you that are not here today on Zoom or Instagram or anywhere else, well, if you're happening to watch this recording later on, I've got the entire series of the Bhagavatam from the first episodes all the way to here, which is the 119th episode, by the way. All of that on my YouTube channel, and you'll find it there in a playlist. You can either watch the playlist that is Divine Love Podcast, or if you want to go straight into the pastimes of Krishna, then you can watch the playlist called Leela, the pastimes of Krishna. So they're all there, all the way up to here, and we'll keep going until we're done with the entire Bhagavatam, which is a huge endeavor. So glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll see you next week at the same time. We begin at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, that would be 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. But otherwise, it's 6 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, 9 p.m. 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. And in India, it is Wednesday. Okay? I don't want to get you confused here. All right. I will see you next week then. Hare Krishna.